Hi, I'm Carissa, and I'm an OK housewife.
Hi, I'm Daisha. I'm also a OK housewife.
And today we have Kayla Jones with us from Jones Counseling here in Edmond, Oklahoma. We are so excited to have her, and she is going to answer some questions for us that we've come up with. So we're just going to dive right in. Okay, Kayla. So let's start by you telling us what you do and what was your why for doing what you do.
Yeah, I am a licensed professional counselor. So in the state of Oklahoma, it's called an LPC. I'm working on my sex therapy certification. So I hope to have more letters behind my name, a CST. And I've been in therapy running, doing counseling and mental health work since 2014, and I have owned my own private practice since 2019. And since September 2023, my husband and I have been running our practice alone, just the two of us, where I used to work with other agencies and some other partnerships before that time. So, why do I do what I do? Long story short, I was introduced to counseling at the age of 20 because of anxiety. And I found that I really enjoyed psychology at the time. And so just started, instead of doing special education was my track, my college track, I shifted over. I was like, I can still do work with special kids in the mental health field.
Mhm.
And that's just evolved over time, where I just love the individual, which is different than social work. Social work thinks about like the community at large, and a professional counselor kind of thinks of the individual or the family unit. And I liked helping one person at a time, finding ways to improve their life, understanding the why behind what they do, trying to understand their trauma triggers. And that's just become a niche of mine of working with particular pieces of mental health and finding ways to thrive and getting out of I kind instead of surviving, let's thrive together, right?
Mhm.
So yeah.
Love that. That is so great.
That is awesome.
Is there any specific type of person and or couple that you see more than others?
Yeah, that's evolved over time. I used to just work with kids actually for a long, long time.
Okay.
And over the years, I've realized that I enjoy working with the parents, and then that's turned into I like working with the adults. And so today, probably the last 2 years, I've really heightened my practice working with women in their parenthood a lot of the time. So sometimes housewives, sometimes just working moms. I seem to work better with women versus men, but I'm actually broadening that scope a little bit today too.
Wow.
And us as a unit, since Jeff and I work together, we something I think we really like to offer is that I'll see the wife, he'll see the husband, and then we'll find a way to bridge the gap for couples work together, and as a team work together. But that's also variable too, depending on. Sometimes I just see couples and things like that. But
I think that's awesome though. Like that you see both, because I know like with Toby when he was going to counseling and I was going to counseling, and it was just like we would try and kind of explain to each other, but it was different when we were like with our counselors, if that makes sense. Like it would have been nice together.
yeah,
Yeah.
we have about 3 or 4 couples right now that have utilized the 4 person counseling session on occasion, and we're hoping to harness a little bit more of that.
Yeah.
Um, it's very intimidating. Me, this is just my um, I'm building my skills here,
Yeah.
but it's intimidating a little bit to be with the couple and it's just me.
Right.
But
That
I'm
would be
finding,
intimidating.
yeah, I'm
You're
finding my
outnumbered.
groove. Yes. It's very complex. It's very complex. So having Jeff as my buddy, like my best friend next to me, while also he's advocating for one of them, I'm advocating for the other. It's just been a really nice dance.
Yeah, I feel like that would probably help a lot of people.
Yeah, and do you, and this isn't a normal question, but do you and Jeff ever find yourself like brainstorming over lunch about people like all the time?
It's really important for therapists to have consultations and to
Mhm.
continue supervising with each other. And so we have it built into our private practice informed consent pieces that we can consult with each other.
Oh, good. Okay.
And then, of course, we get verbal permission from our couples of like, hey, we would like to powwow about this and explore how we want to do this for you guys. And they're usually okay. And we do save time to consult, but we make sure we do it confidentially. So I don't want people to think like we're at a restaurant talking about them.
Sure.
But we do it in our office or at our house where it's just the two of us. And we often don't even say people's names still. We're like,
Yeah.
okay, so-and-so, or use the initials like JT or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would make sense.
Just because that's so ingrained. Of, like,
Well, and it's
confidentiality.
just you don't want to ethically
for sure.
touch something or create some type of ripple where someone loses trust, where that's so big in the therapy room. So
And as we were talking about before this, like Oklahoma is very small. So
it really
like,
is.
you could almost be talking about someone at a restaurant. If they overheard you talking, they may actually even know them.
Yes.
It's quite possible.
We made that connection.
Yes.
But we knew who we knew
Yes.
together.
We knew someone from like 20 years ago,
Uh-huh.
which is just like insane. But it's so Oklahoma
Yeah.
of us. Yeah.
It is.
Which I love that about Oklahoma. But sometimes when it comes to personal things, you're just like, I wish everybody didn't know everything about me.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
especially if we're doing something really intimate or vulnerable,
Yeah,
we want to,
yeah.
again, we have those ethical laws and boundaries we have, but we
Mhm.
want to make sure that we're delicate with that information too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like you guys actually, do you abide by HIPAA and all of that
We
stuff?
have to.
You have to. Okay, I figured. Yeah, for sure.
Yes. HIPAA. Yes.
You're like, yes,
Yes.
we do. We abide by HIPAA. We don't break any laws. Yes. Well, part of the reason I was so excited and to have you on here was because I personally feel like we have an intimacy crisis in society right now. I feel like people are out of touch with each other. I mean, we've seen it with this younger generation quite a bit, right? And so, do you agree with that? Why or why not?
Yeah, so I thought about this question a lot about the intimacy crisis. I like that language, intimacy crisis, because I think it is something that's an undertone to everything we're dealing with today.
Mhm.
And so I thought about this, and I was exploring the idea that our Western culture, for 7 decades, if not a little bit longer, has been filtering this mindset of power, success, performance-based living, right?
Mhm.
And they've been honing in on the nuclear family benefits. So they wanted us to become the married with 2.5 kids, white picket fence kind of, they were pushing that image, right? And intimacy is not what we think it is. So when you say intimacy, I'm sure you have your own definition, right? But intimacy is actually the closeness we have with people in relationships. And there's 6 realms of intimacy. 5. Emotional intimacy, physical intimacy, intellectual intimacy, spiritual intimacy, and experiential. So it's brain, body, soul, and everything around you. And one thing that I'm noticing when I was thinking about this question is that there's village intimacy, not just couple intimacy.
Yeah.
And that's where I think the crisis is.
I agree. Mhm.
And so, one, I think the reason we're in a crisis right now is because of the lack of teaching over the past few generations of how to cultivate intimacy, not only with your partner, but with your friends and your community at large. And the society bridging the gap of, not bridging the gap, but creating a gap of, we wanted you to have it here in the nuclear and not in your village, right? And so then I was thinking about like COVID times, and I'm like, they were teaching us to not trust our neighbor. They were teaching us to hate on each other and creating these little internal wars. And that's creating more of that division in intimacy overall. So I agree with it. I think we are. I think there's ways to combat it. I think there are some generations, I think millennials and Gen Z, I don't want to say it wrong, are working on ways to be like, we're depleted. We need to fill in these gaps, right? And so we're finding ways to do it, but we're constantly fighting that power performance battle.
Oh yeah, I think that is like the case, especially with like our generation with millennials.
Yeah.
Because we still have that like old time view of things, but still like trying to adapt now, and like I don't know. I feel like that's like a huge part of the crisis, like for our generation.
Yes. And again, I think all of this has a domino effect. So internet, social media, all those things creating false lines of community, false ways of connection, when in reality it's not what our body's been used to for millennia, right? Another thing that I wanted to bring to focus was, I think intimacy has a preciousness base. Like, you're precious and it's okay to be vulnerable. Where our society in particular, is performance based.
Yeah.
How much can you do? How much can you spend? How much can you buy? And so I think the intimacy that they're cultivating is with our stuff and not with our people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Which I kind of like. I told Deja like I kind of got some insight from Jeff when I was talking about you coming. Did he tell you?
A little bit.
Yeah, as far as like the root of intimacy, though, like I was telling him, like my interpretation of intimacy is rooted in vulnerability.
Yeah.
But he told me vulnerability is actually the root of that is what? Self-esteem,
Self-worth.
self-worth. So, like, explain that to me as far as so someone who refuses to be vulnerable actually doesn't feel like they're worthy
Yeah.
of being vulnerable?
Most likely. There's lots of reasons why someone may not be vulnerable. A lot of times it's because they've had broken trust, right? Or ruptures along the way. Or they were never taught or modeled how to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And usually we can create some lines down into that where it is self-worth based. There's something blocking you from feeling worthy of being vulnerable and finding value in vulnerability. And if you can't find that, then you probably can't find intimacy either.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But one thing, so Jeff and I both, I think this is okay. We are trained in a program called Making Sense of Your Worth, started out of the Halo Project with Cindy Lee, and it is international. There's like 2,000 people all over the world trained in this curriculum about self-worth. And one thing that I learned from that is every decision we make for ourselves is rooted in where we are in our self-worth. And so if I'm choosing not to talk to somebody and being vulnerable with my boss or my partner, it's probably because there's some decision I'm making that has to do with my value that I have in myself. And I thought that was huge for me. One of my examples that I do in the group curriculum is I only applied to one college. I was a straight A student. I was a people pleaser. I was a good kid, right? And I only tried UCO. I'd been in Oklahoma my whole life, only applied to UCO. I had the ACT. I had the grades. But I told myself, oh, this is what I want. And I look back, I'm like, no, I did that because I didn't think I was worthy.
Right.
And I was too fearful of rejection or too fearful of what mountain I had to climb to be successful there. I'm like, that wasn't fair to little 18-year-old Kayla.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
That's so sad when you think about it that way. And I mean, do you think that couples can exist within a relationship without that type of vulnerability?
depends on your rules of engagement. If you are coming into your relationship with that barrier that that's not where we're going, then they can. But it has to be mutually decided upon. Most of us, though, go into, especially marriage, like heteronormative marriages, with this default belief of rules of engagement. And so, of course, most of us usually want that, right? And so if one person expects it and the other one can't go, then that creates the discourse. But if both people are like, we're not going to be emotionally intimate and spiritually intimate, but we can be financially intimate and physically intimate, and are we both okay with that? Then that can function.
Yeah.
So it's like those two, like what would that type of couple be? Like somebody who's just like, they're both super driven and they're both just like, hey, you know, we're just in this for companionship kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
and those exist all over. In the sex therapy realm, there's this thing called relationship anarchy, where people are learning how to pick and choose what pieces of relationship typical dynamics exist and what they want to have and what they don't want to have. There's some famous couples out there, and I'll have to give you some names, but there's some famous, very high power couples out there that actually exist and live separately and have their marriages, and they find these ways to make it work. And so again, they're just picking and choosing what works for them.
Do you think like most of these couples, do they make these decisions like on their own? Like, do they speak about them? Or are these like subconscious decisions, like going into it, and then like when they draw the lines of like what they will and won't allow?
Yeah, no, both can happen. But I think for it to be successful and honorable, it has to be talked about.
Yeah.
It has to be laid out.
Yeah.
And I think it's when couples end up not talking about it where it becomes 5 years down the line. They're like, why am I here? How did we get here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever see where like couples will morph into that
Oh, yes.
all the time? Like older people where they get you know, it doesn't even have to be older people, but where they get just complacent and they decide that they're no longer going to be vulnerable in their relationship. And so they're just like, hey, we're just coexisting.
Yes.
Like, you know, grandparents that have separate bedrooms kind of thing.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I do. And I think any couple, especially long-term couples, maybe in my mid-30s, ask me in a couple years, right? Ask me 10 years, 20 years if I agree with this statement still. But I do believe that most of us in long-term relationships are susceptible to that.
Sure.
That roommate deathbed feeling that they call it. But it's when we're bringing attention and practicing vulnerability even after rupture is when that's maybe avoiding that pitfall.
Sorry. I want to go back to like the intimacy crisis for the village. Like, what do you think is the solution or like a solution to begin to fix that?
And these are questions that we did not prepare ahead of time. So, you know, we're having to like think on them, right?
Yeah, well, don't hold me accountable, right? I mean, hold me accountable, but be
Yeah.
kind. I think the first, and this actually goes to one of the questions we had about couples. How do couples build that? And my answer to that was hard conversations.
Yeah.
And so us being willing to come together and have those hard conversations. I'm not saying mean conversations. I'm not saying we have to disagree or anything like that, but being able to broach the topics that we're not taught to talk about. Finding ways to talk about those hard questions and those hard topics and finding ways to work through them. Usually that includes, what do we call it? Compromising, working with. One thing I think in my culture, which is little white Christian woman growing up, right?
Is weird. That's our culture too.
Is I was never taught to speak for my needs, that I should put everyone else first.
Yeah.
If it's God first, my husband first, or whatever. And here it's like I got to hold myself, again, part of the work thing. I got to hold myself to a good standard and hold myself up so that I can speak for my needs and then invite everybody in with me. And I think that's how we can remedy some of the village stuff too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have I don't know if we haven't put out this podcast, but we have had a podcast about friendships and like the dynamics and how much they change as you get older, like what you allow yourself to put up with to some extent, you know? And so that is what kind of made me think about like these subconscious things that you allow or don't allow within your village. And I have found like with friendships where the hard conversations are becoming almost non-existent. Not in my relationships with people I've had my entire life, more in my adult relationships. And it's like,
They can't go there.
Yeah.
They like women these days when you go, you know, hey, you know, it upset me because of XYZ. It's like you might as well just end the friendship because they can't even go there.
Yes.
Right? Is that what you're alluding to?
I mean, that's exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, and that actually, one of my friends from when I was 5 years old, like we don't speak anymore because I told her she hurt my feelings about something and there was not a conversation. There was just
a shutdown,
silence, and I haven't spoken to her in 4 months.
That makes me sad.
Yeah.
So is that like, is the friend feeling like she's not worthy?
It could be multiple things.
Yeah. But I just feel like that.
You're like, how can we have a village when I can't even talk to you about this?
Well, and I think that goes back to my societal input about the intimacy crisis, right?
Yeah.
If we are only valuing success in performance-based living, then the win is when we win, right? And there is a therapist, her name is Casey Taylor. She owns Queer Sex Therapy Instagram. She started a book called Feel It All. And she talked about there's success in flailing too. Yeah. And so this idea of like, we can be messy here and that's still successful and we can figure that out. But our society only highlights the win.
Yeah.
You are perfect. Look at you being perfect.
The highlight reel.
And that is so true. Like people don't want to get messy.
No.
And that is so contrary to who I am. Like I'm like,
let's dig in.
Get comfortable. Like we are going to dig until we hit something. And my husband's the opposite. He's like,
mine is too.
Yeah, we married.
Yeah,
same people.
Yeah.
And they shove. Don't want to talk about it. And then
boil over.
And then that's when there is a rupture, as you would say. And I mean, it's just
Yeah. And I mean, that's honestly part of the reason why we wanted to have this podcast to begin with, is because we want to show the mess, and we want to talk to it.
Well, and I like the okay. Okay,
Yeah.
AY housewife, right? This idea of like, we don't have to be perfect, and
We're
we can
not.
celebrate not being perfect.
Right.
yeah.
And I think
Join
that's
us.
I think
Yeah.
that's where we can make change in the culture and the village. Is we don't have to be perfect. It's the goal of, we value coming back together.
Yeah.
Jeff and I call it recircling.
Mm.
And so one of my mentors said, you can never avoid rupture, but what you can always guarantee is the repair.
Oh yeah.
Right? So if I make a mistake with my kid, I'm gonna hurt her feelings. I'm gonna make her upset, right? But if I can repair with her, that's something that I can offer her that maybe I never got.
Yeah.
And so Jeff and I call that repair. Okay, we're gonna circle back. We're gonna recircle and make sure that everyone here is content and feeling heard and seen and valued, even though that there may have been mistakes and mess along the way.
For sure.
That's so good. That's so good. So what are some ways that, and you may have already kind of touched on some of this, but what are some ways that we can create intimacy within our relationships?
So that's the one I was thinking about, hard
Yeah.
conversations,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Learning, practicing, gathering information to having hard conversations. I think for most of us, it might mean a buildup. Like, I need to practice having light, hard conversations to the heavy, hard conversations. I think some other things we can do is just keep circling and practicing, listening and being educated by people that we value and that match our belief systems and our values. And then I think finding people and reminding ourselves that we're safe with those people that we trust,
Right.
right? And so if I'm building intimacy with my partner, like my romantic, intimate partner, my husband, it would be, okay, I got to remind myself that he and I have a foundation of trust and what's authentic, what's the word? Unconditional positive regard. Like, we both want the best for each other. And so, yeah, if we get loud and upset, it's not because he wants all things bad for me.
Right.
Where if I'm talking to my friend, it may be different of like, okay, we have this foundation of trust and she's here to have her feel heard and seen, and I can do that for her too. And so sometimes it's the self-talk, sometimes it's the practicing putting the output with other people and trying things that maybe we've never even really seen or been modeled before too.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah. I feel like in parenting, like that's been something I've tried to grow in. Like I mean, my parents were wonderful. Like, if they're listening to this, my dad, like, they were great parents. They only knew what they knew.
Exactly.
You know, and I mean, I can't remember my parents ever apologizing.
To you?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, really?
That's something
Yeah.
I've read about in
Oh.
earlier generations, is the one-sided apology. And that was something that I was taught is you did something wrong, you have to apologize.
Yeah.
I'm like, but you're yelling at me, right?
Yeah.
My therapist, I love her so much. I've had her for 8 years.
Oh, wow.
I won't tell her because I don't want people to flutter
Yeah.
stuff. But one thing she reminded me is like, yeah, in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, there was maybe one parenting book about treating the child with respect and having that voice heard and things like that. And if she happened to find it in the right space at the library, then maybe they had access to it.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's this idea of like, they just didn't know what they didn't know.
Yeah.
Right. It's true.
Right. And I felt like the first time I can remember like the first time I apologized to Tucker, and it was, and even just for me, like it was eye-opening for me to feel that. And I could tell he was kind of like, I mean, it's okay. Like it's fine, Mom.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm the only one who does anything bad. That's basically what it comes down
yeah,
to.
yeah. And so I feel like that translates into other relationships. Like, I've gotten so much better about, I mean, even my husband will say, like, he's like, it's nice because you now apologize. Like, before it was always like deflection, you know, which obviously will promote intimacy and vulnerability.
It
It's
does.
vulnerability. Apologizing is vulnerability.
Right, right.
Yeah.
It is.
Mhm.
And saying that I'm safe enough to know that I made a mistake and you're still gonna love me
And
anyways.
you're still gonna love me.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Oh, makes me happy.
There's just like those little things like that where you're just like, man, we're all just these like broken little babies.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, my parents thankfully apologized to me growing up, but we had a counselor, like we had like a family counselor growing up, and that kind of like helped usher that.
Mhm.
Once a week we'd have family meetings, which I should do in my own family.
There's
But
good science behind it, actually.
yeah, we'd have family meetings and everyone would talk about how they felt. And, I remember breaking down in those meetings and going, I was really upset when this happened. And the counselor would like look at the parent and go, okay. And they'd go, I'm sorry I hurt you. Do you forgive me? And so going through those motions were really healthy and really good. And I think gave me a good basis for vulnerability, to where it made us feel like we could do that with other people.
Well, and think of the
Yeah.
alternative. If we were in a family where I spoke about feeling hurt and that was met with
Or
rejection
get over it.
or gaslighting,
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
that's going to shut down that openness to being vulnerable with other people.
So then it just repeats
It does. It's like-
in all their relationships.
Yeah.
So then it's like, man, when they get married, if they had that in their home life growing up, it's just like it continues on.
So this brings me to a thought. I read in a book. It's called What My Bones Know. It's a trauma story about this journalist. Long story short, she brought this idea of the two-way apology to me, of like most of our generation, millennials and before, most of us got the one-sided apology experience with our parents. And what I realized through her teachings in that book is if I can apologize to my kid, then she knows what that mutual respect, that reciprocity is like. And she's going to expect it from not only her partners, her friends, but her employers,
Wow.
her administrations, her government leaders, all the things. And then, like, we're going to keep that helps her build her self-worth. That even if you do something wrong, I do something, we can have a reciprocal apology and repair.
Well, it's just like replacing the like apologies weakness. Like
Mhm.
you were weak, you made a mistake.
That's
like,
what it
be
is.
better. It is.
Yeah.
Like
The prior generation, hey, throw some dirt on it, toughen up, apologies show weakness.
Yeah.
So maybe that's part of that question about creating intimacy, right? Or
yes,
cultivating
yes,
it.
absolutely.
Would be, I think, changing the belief systems on repair.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apologies specifically.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Oh,
Like, hey, everyone needs to start apologizing to each other more,
yes.
especially to your children.
Yes.
And then we'll create that baseline for them
Yes.
for that vulnerability.
I like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Please join us next week as we continue this conversation with Kayla Jones from Jones Counseling. Have a great week.